Learning from AlphaGo. If there was one moment in the history of AI that truly revealed the potential of AI to us, it was in this match. It was a match that took place in 2016 between AlphaGo and Lee Sedol. Lee Sedol wasn't the world champion at Go, but he was one of the most accomplished players at the game. AlphaGo is a system that was developed by DeepMind in London, a company whose CEO is Demis Hassabis, and which has been now acquired by Google. The match took place in 2016 and was the obvious next step in terms of levels of difficulty after the game of chess against Garry Kasparov and the Jeopardy tournament. But Go itself is a far more complex game than chess could ever be. There are more moves at the game of Go than there are atoms in the universe, as it is said, which suggests that it would be impossible to try and to learn how to play Go using the same techniques that we used for Deep Blue. What was required was a shift from expert systems, in other words, systems that had been fully programmed by being trained in all possible games of chess out there, to learning systems that were able to learn as they went and to be able to handle the complexities of this situation. There is a wonderful documentary about this, AlphaGo, and I'm just going to show you the preview of that documentary.
Go is the world's oldest continuously played board game. It is one of the simplest and also most abstract.
Beating a professional player at Go is a long-standing challenge of artificial intelligence.
Everything we've ever tried in AI just falls over when you try the game of Go.
The number of possible configurations of the board is more than the number of atoms in the universe.
AlphaGo found a way to learn how to play Go.
So far, AlphaGo has beaten every challenge we've given it, but we won't know its true strength until we play somebody who is at the top of the world, like Lee Sedol.
A match like no other is about to get underway in South Korea.
Lee Sedol is to Go what Roger Federer is to tennis.
Just the very thought of a machine playing a human is inherently intriguing.
The place is a madhouse.
Welcome to the DeepMind Challenge.
The whole world is watching.
Can Lee Sedol find AlphaGo's weakness?
Ooh.
Whoa. Is there, in fact, a weakness?
The game kind of turned on its axis.
Look at his face.
That is not a confident face.
It's developing into a very, very dangerous fight. Ooh, hold the phone. Lee has left the room.
In the end, it is about pride.
I hate that something went wrong.
Yeah, it's made in tech.
It's got to pronounce it American.
These ideas that are driving AlphaGo are going to drive our future.
This is it, folks.
There's one particular comment that I want to highlight from that trailer. These ideas that are driving AlphaGo are going to drive our future. I believe this to be a highly significant comment. The question, of course, is how they will be driving the future of architecture. There was one particular move in the entire match that has become hyper famous. Game 2, move 37. And here it is. I myself, I've never played Go, I don't understand the game at all, but I understand from what's been written about this that this was one of the most significant moves ever made in Go in the whole entire history of the game. A game that goes back several thousand years, and a game that is highly popular in countries in Asia, especially in China and Korea. The move had never been made, and at the time when it was made, many of the commentators watching the match thought there was a mistake. And apparently a smile appeared on Lee Sedol's face when he first saw it, then thinking it was a computer glitch. But that smile soon drained when he realized the strategic brilliance of the move. And in fact, there were several such moves during this match. They were referred to as slack moves. Slack moves because nobody No human player could grasp the strategic relevance of the move until several moves later. But then it became absolutely clear how brilliant those moves had been. This move has, of course, changed the game of Go forever. It's now part of the repertoire of Go. But to my mind, the move is far more significant than just that. The comment, of course, that Lisa Doll made when he after the first match was, yesterday I was surprised, but today I am speechless after game two, that is. And this is a comment made by Fan Hui, who is the European Go champion. He's from China originally, and he was a commentator on the match. When AlphaGo chose that move, I assumed that it had made a mistake. I immediately looked to see Lisa Doll's reaction. At first, he seemed to smile as though he too thought it had been a mistake. But as the minutes rolled by, it was clear that he was starting to realize its brilliance. In fact, after the match, he said that when he saw the move, he finally realized that AlphaGo was creative. When I use the term creative there, or when he used the term, I think we need to question exactly what the term creative might mean in the context of a computer. In fact, Lisa Doll goes even further, and he points out that AlphaGo showed us that moves humans may have thought are creative were actually conventional. This takes me back to a moment when earlier on Alan Turing had made a somewhat curious observation about the capacity of computers to be creative. And he talks about them and their capacity to even write sonnets. We have to have some experience with the machine before we really know its capabilities. It may take years before we settle down to the new possibilities, but I do not see why it should not enter any one of the fields normally covered by the human intellect and can eventually compete on equal terms. I do not think you could even draw the line about sonnets. Though the comparison is perhaps a little unfair, because a sonnet written by a machine will be better appreciated by another machine. This is a very interesting kind of comment. We might perhaps speculate whether or not a machine could even appreciate a composition, in that they're not necessarily self-aware, they can't understand, they can't think, and so on. But nonetheless, the point being that he's assuming that the machine would operate at a higher level than we would, and we wouldn't even be able to recognize its brilliance. To go back to the example of a dog, for example, the range of smell, the range of hearing that a dog has far exceeds that of human beings. So why do we assume that we are the ultimate creators? Why could a computer not produce something more remarkable than we could? And this, of course, is the comment that Elon Musk reacts to when Jack Ma makes this ridiculous, absurd comment. I never in my life say human beings will be controlled by machines. It's impossible. Human beings can never create another thing that is smarter than human beings. And Elon Musk's point is, I very much disagree with it, the biggest mistake I see people making is to assume that they're smart. People underestimate the capability of AI. They sort of think it's like a smart human, but it's going to be much smarter than the smartest human you will ever know. And the problem being that we won't even recognize how brilliant it is, because we're not even able to comprehend the brilliance of these particular moves. That particular match had consequences way beyond the game of Go. As Kai-Fu Lee comments in his book AI Superpowers, China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order, it was responsible for what he calls the Sputnik moment. Now, back in the 1950s, when the Russians launched the Sputnik satellite into space, before the Americans had even achieved anything remotely similar, this was a huge shock for the Americans in the space race. As a result of the Sputnik moment, that moment of shock, NASA was formed, the American Space Agency. And this had a very similar effect on the Chinese nation. To us, Go is a very unfamiliar game. We don't play it very much, but it is the national game of China. And a result of this, by 2017, President Xi announced a new plan for China to invest in AI with a view to overtaking the states in AI development by 2030. Not only that, but in Korea, the country in which the match had been played, the president of South Korea expressed her gratitude for the match. Above all, she comments, Korean society is ironically lucky that thanks to the AlphaGo shock, the Sputnik moment, we have learnt the importance of AI before it is too late. Others too have recognized the importance of AI. Vladimir Putin has famously said, whoever controls AI controls the world. And let's not underestimate what's been going on in the West. OpenAI, SpaceX, Tesla, and so on. There are huge advances being made in the United States at the moment. So are the ideas that are driving AlphaGo going to also drive the future of architecture? One thing that is for sure is that the follow-up to AlphaGo, one of the models that was produced after AlphaGo, AlphaGo Zero, had a huge impact on the architectural profession. AlphaGo Zero was remarkable for many different ways. It was remarkable because it was so much better than AlphaGo. It took on AlphaGo and won 100 games to 0. Not only that, but it taught itself to play Go. It taught itself to play Go without knowing the rules, using reinforcement learning. Finally, almost the most remarkable fact about AlphaGo Zero was the fact that the number of games it could play in the time available. In the space of 3 days, it played 4.9 million games of Go against itself. Now, we can't even comprehend what 4.9 million games of Go is, but if I say to you that's the equivalent of 20 games of Go a second, you can understand precisely how incomprehensible that figure is. Not only is AlphaGo or AlphaGo itself and AlphaGo Zero able to come up with moves that we can't even recognize, moves of such brilliance we can't even recognize, but the speed at which it was trained is simply beyond our comprehension. This is a wake-up call, not just for Korea, not just for China, not just indeed for the whole world of Go, but also for architects. Indeed, it was as a result of AlphaGo Zero that Xcool, a company based in Shenzhen in China, run by Guan Yuhe, who is a DDES candidate at FIU, began to realize the potential of what deep learning really had to offer the world of architecture. This is a version of StyleGANs that is in some ways emulating an earlier version that was used to hallucinate faces. This person does not exist as a site that was set up and which used the possibility of StyleGANs to generate automatically millions of faces, one after the other, all incredibly realistic, using the power of AI. And Xcool set up for a while a website, or hosted on the website a program called This Building Does Not Exist, that was able to generate thousands of versions of a building, hallucinate them, totally through deep learning itself. There are other lessons, I would argue, that come from AlphaGo. In 1972, there was a book that was published called Learning from Las Vegas, published by Robert Venturi, Denise Scott Brown, and Steve Eisenhower, that had a huge impact on architectural culture. What I would claim is that 50 years later, AlphaGo has got us lessons that is able to teach architecture lessons. AlphaGo is able to teach architecture far more than Las Vegas ever could do. The crucial moment in the history of AI, as far as I'm concerned, for architecture, was that match between AlphaGo and Lee Sedol and the consequences of that match. Learning from AlphaGo is going to be something that will remain with architecture forever.